Hi there. Welcome back to MC Time Trackers. Today, I'm not just sharing another story from history. I'm traveling with you through time and through the beauty of how English sounds. So, make sure to turn off any distractions, take a deep breath, and just relax. I'll speak slowly and clearly so you can enjoy every word, every moment, and every piece of history that shaped our world. Let's begin this journey together. The story of us, the beginning. Our story began billions of years ago, long before cities, languages, or even life itself. Around 3 billion years ago, we existed only as tiny atoms floating in the vast bubbling ocean of the young Earth. Fast forward to about 6 million years ago. That's when the first hominids, our distant ancestors, began to walk the earth. They were part of the primate family that would eventually give birth to us humans. About 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus became the first species to leave Africa. They had bigger brains than those before them and started to explore and settle in new lands. Then, roughly 400,000 years ago, the Neanderthals appeared. They lived in the cold lands of Europe and Western Asia, adapting to the harsh climate with strong bodies and faces that looked strikingly human. And then came us Homo sapiens, the last survivors of the human line. But how did we, fragile beings of flesh and bone, rise to dominate the planet? The answer lies in one word: civilization. Our story begins in Mesopotamia, around 4000 BCE, in the rich, fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, in the city of Ur, people discovered something that would change humanity forever: agriculture. Instead of chasing animals or gathering berries, they learned how to grow their own food grains like wheat and barley. It wasn't easy work. At first, they used a simple tool called a hand mill, 2 heavy stones used to crush grains into flour. But from that humble beginning, farming was born. For the first time, humans could create their own food supply. This changed everything. Cities grew. Ur became home to more than 50,000 people, one of the first true urban centers on Earth. But this progress came with a price. Early farmers were smaller and weaker than their hunter ancestors. Men's average height dropped from 5'9" to about 5'3". Women shrank too. The strong hunters of the past became quiet farmers tied to the land. Humanity itself began to change. Around 3000 BCE, according to legend, King Gilgamesh ruled over the Sumerians. But by the end of that era, Sumeria was conquered by Sargon the Great of Akkad, who built the first great empire in human history. Meanwhile, far away in what is now Pakistan, another great civilization was rising: the Indus Valley Civilization, 300 BCE. What made them special wasn't their temples or palaces, but their incredible plumbing system. Their cities had toilets with seats and underground drains carrying waste away, something unheard of for that time. It kept their cities clean, healthy, and ahead of their age. In Egypt, however, people were focused on something else entirely: eternal life. The Egyptians believed their pharaohs would live forever in the afterlife, ruling the world of spirits just as they ruled the living. So they built pyramids, massive monuments that would hold the bodies of their divine kings. Inside, the pharaohs were carefully mummified, their bodies wrapped and preserved for eternity. The tombs were filled with treasures, food, and gold offerings to help them rule in the afterlife. The tradition began with Pharaoh Djoser and his step pyramid at Saqqara around 2667 BCE, followed by Sneferu, who built the bent and red pyramids. But it was Khufu, reigning from 2589 to 2566 BCE, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, a masterpiece that took 20 years and still amazes the world today. While Egypt reached for the heavens, China was taking its first steps as a nation. Around 2100 BCE, the legendary Yu the Great faced a crisis: the Yellow River floods. These floods destroyed crops and caused famine. For years, Yu worked tirelessly, building levees and canals to control the waters. After 13 years, he succeeded saving his people. In gratitude, they made him their ruler, and so the Xia dynasty, the first Chinese dynasty, was born. Legend or not, Yu's story introduced a powerful idea that leadership should be based on merit, that the one who deserves power should hold it. This belief shaped China for centuries. Back in Mesopotamia, around 1772 BCE, King Hammurabi of Babylon carved something that would change society forever: the Code of Hammurabi. It was written on a tall stone slab, nearly 7 feet high, with 282 laws etched into it. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. If he breaks another man's bone, they shall break his bone. It was harsh, yes, but it was also revolutionary. For the first time, laws applied to everyone, though not equally. A noble's life was worth more than a slave's, a truth that echoed through much of history. Meanwhile, in modern-day Turkey, the Hittite Empire rose under King Labarnas, 1650 BCE. He united the Hittite city-states into one strong kingdom, expanding his lands and ruling with wisdom and justice. And in Greece, a new world was forming. The Mycenaean civilization, 1100 BCE, was built around warrior kings and grand palaces. Each city, like Troy or Pylos, was independent, forming what we now call city-states. This was also when the first form of written Greek, known as Linear B, began to appear. Back in Egypt, society itself became a kind of pyramid, a social pyramid. At the bottom were the farmers and slaves, doing the hard labor. Above them were artisans, crafting beautiful art and jewelry. Merchants traded along the Nile. Scribes recorded taxes and royal events. Soldiers protected the kingdom. Bureaucrats and priests managed temples and administration. At the top stood the pharaoh, the divine ruler, the bridge between gods and men. Every part of life existed to serve him. One of the most famous was Pharaoh Ramses II, 1279–1213 BCE. He built magnificent temples like Abu Simbel and Karnak, and fought many battles to expand Egypt's power, especially against the Hittites. In 1274 BCE, Ramses and the Hittite king Muwatalli II faced off in the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in history. It ended in a draw, but something remarkable followed. the first peace treaty ever recorded. Both sides agreed to never attack each other again, and for a time, peace brought prosperity. But peace never lasts forever. By around 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire fell to mysterious invaders known as the Sea Peoples, vanishing into history. Across the ocean, in the Americas, another civilization was rising, the Olmecs, 1000, 200, 400 BCE. We don't know much about them as their writing remains undeciphered, but their massive stone heads, each carved with unique faces, still stand as a silent memory of their greatness. Meanwhile, in China, a new dynasty, the Jocho, took power in 1046 BCE. They introduced the idea of the mandate of heaven, the belief that a ruler's power came from divine approval. If a king ruled unjustly, the heavens would send floods, droughts, or earthquake signs that it was time for change. The Zhou era also saw the rise of new philosophies. Confucius taught respect, loyalty, and responsibility, shaping the moral foundation of China. Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, spoke of harmony, the balance between yin and yang, light and dark, life and death. As centuries passed, Greece grew again. Around 800 BCE, the land's poor soil pushed them to explore and colonize. They spread across the Mediterranean, founding cities from France to Russia. Among them was Rome, said to be founded by Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a wolf. When they grew up, Romulus killed his brother and named the city after himself, Rome, 753 BCE. And while Greece and Rome expanded, a new empire was rising in the East Persia. The story began with Cyrus the Great, who rebelled against his grandfather and eventually conquered Babylon, the Indus Valley, and beyond. His Persian Empire became one of the largest in human history. Later came Darius the Great, who ruled it with unmatched power. But in the West, two Greek city-states were preparing to challenge him, Sparta and Athens. Sparta was a world built on war. Boys were taken from their families and trained to fight from a young age. Weak babies were left to die. Life was brutal. Strength was everything. Athens, on the other hand, dreamed of something different: democracy. Citizens gathered to vote, debate, and decide. Their system wasn't perfect, but it was the first spark of an idea that would one day shape the modern world. And that's where our story, the story of us, begins to take shape. From the scattered atoms of creation to the rise of civilization, humanity was no longer surviving. We were becoming something greater. The rise of empires, from Athens to Rome. MC Time Tracker's version, simplified and narrative tone. In ancient Athens, democracy was not just a dream. It was an experiment in human governance. Every tribe in Athens had to provide 50 citizens each year to serve in the Council of 500. These men weren't chosen by fame or fortune, but through a fascinating machine called the Clariterion. Each eligible citizen received a small token with their name. These tokens were dropped into the machine's tubes, and by a mix of chance and design, the device randomly selected the council members. The chosen 500 decided what topics the larger assembly of citizens would vote on. In theory, every citizen had an equal voice, But in reality, citizen only meant free Athenian men born of Athenian parents. Women, slaves, and foreigners had no vote at all. When the assembly gathered, more than 30,000 people could attend. To keep order, 9 temporary presidents were selected the morning of each meeting, a clever move to prevent bribery or corruption. The assembly voted by shouting aloud voices, deciding the fate of laws, wars, and leaders. But not everyone admired this noisy democracy. The philosopher Plato thought it was chaos disguised as freedom. In his famous book, The Republic, he compared government to steering a ship. Would you let a random passenger sail it? Or would you trust a trained navigator? Plato believed only the wise, those who studied truth and justice, should rule. He dreamed of a philosopher king, a ruler who guided society through reason, not popularity. Yet, as history shows, every ruler believes they are wise enough to rule. From China's emperors to India's princes, each claimed to be guided by reason or divine destiny. The awakening of a prince. Around 500 BCE in India, a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama lived in luxury inside his palace. He had everything: gold, jewels, pleasure. His father had built a perfect world for him, a paradise without pain. But one day, Siddhartha stepped beyond the palace gates. Outside, he saw something that shattered his illusion: an old man dying by the road. For the first time, he realized that all life ends, and that suffering touches everyone. This revelation changed him forever. He left his royal life behind and wandered the world, searching for truth. For years, he studied with wise teachers and practiced deep meditation. Finally, after 6 long years, he sat beneath a fig tree and vowed not to rise until he found enlightenment. When he did, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one. His enlightenment was not a miracle, it was understanding. He saw that peace comes from letting go of greed and ego, and from awakening the mind to compassion. For the rest of his life, he traveled, teaching the path to inner peace and harmony. Clash of empires: Greece versus Persia. While the Buddha sought peace, the world elsewhere sought conquest. In the West, the Persian king Darius I ruled a mighty empire and wanted to add Greece to it. In 490 BCE, his forces landed at Marathon, only 26 miles from Athens. The Athenians were outnumbered 2-1, yet they fought with courage and strategy. The Greek hoplites, heavily armed foot soldiers, smashed through Persian lines, forcing them to retreat to their ships. Out of 6,400 Persian dead, Athens lost only 192 men. When victory came, a messenger named Phidippides ran the entire 26-mile distance back to Athens to announce the triumph, an act remembered today as the first marathon. But Persia was not finished. Darius's son Xerxes I returned with a massive army, over 100,000 soldiers. In 480 BCE, at a narrow pass called Thermopylae, King Leonidas of Sparta and 7,000 Greeks made a heroic stand. They fought fiercely, but were eventually surrounded and killed. Their sacrifice, however, became legend, an example of courage against impossible odds. Soon after came the Battle of Salamis, a naval showdown. Though the Persians had more ships, the Greek general Themistocles lured them into the narrow straits where the massive Persian fleet couldn't maneuver. The Greeks struck hard and won. Finally, at Plataea, the United Greek City-States gathered 110,000 warriors to crush the Persian army once and for all. The victory ended the Persian threat and ushered in Greece's Golden Age, the Golden Age of Athens. Peace brought prosperity. In Athens, the Parthenon rose above the city, a marble masterpiece celebrating art and wisdom. Festivals like the City Dionysia gave birth to theater itself, as playwrights like Sophocles and Aristophanes turned myth into story and emotion. But power breeds rivalry. Athens led the Delian League, while Sparta formed the Peloponnesian League. When both tried to dominate Greece, war broke out in 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War. After years of bloody battles, Athens launched a disastrous invasion of Sicily. Disease, hunger, and defeat crushed its army. 10 years later, Athens surrendered. Sparta stood victorious, but both were weakened. The glory of classical Greece was fading, waiting for a new conqueror. The rise of the East. Meanwhile, in China, after 8 centuries, the Zhou dynasty fell apart. The country split into rival kingdoms during the Warring States period 475–221 BCE. Amid the chaos, a philosopher named Han Feizi proposed legalism, a belief that people are selfish and need strict laws, harsh punishments, and absolute rulers to maintain order. At the same time, across the ocean in what is now Mexico, the Zapotec civilization flourished. High in the mountains of Monte Alban, they built temples, invented writing with glyphs, and tracked time with a 365-day calendar, proof that distant peoples, unknown to each other, were rising together in brilliance. Alexander the Great. In 356 BCE, in the northern Greek kingdom of Macedon, a child was born who would change the world, Alexander the Great. His father, King Philip II, was a conqueror. His teacher, the great philosopher Aristotle, founder of logic and the scientific method. When Philip was assassinated, 20-year-old Alexander took the throne. When the Greek city of Thebes rebelled, he marched 240 miles in just 14 days, destroyed the city, and sold its survivors into slavery. The message was clear: no one would defy him. Alexander then turned his gaze east, toward Persia. At the Battle of Issus, 333 BCE, he defeated Darius III, who fled the battlefield. A few years later, at Gaugamela, Alexander's brilliant tactics again crushed the Persians. He entered Babylon, Persepolis, and all of Mesopotamia, becoming master of the ancient world. He marched onward through Iran, Afghanistan, and even into India. But when his weary soldiers refused to go farther, Alexander turned back. He died young, just 32 years old, in Babylon. Yet his dream lived on. His conquests spread Greek ideas far and wide, blending East and West into a new cultural era, the Hellenistic Age. Ashoka the Great, the emperor who changed. In India, Alexander's invasion left behind turmoil, but also new empires. The most powerful was the Mauryan Empire, ruled by Ashoka the Great. After a brutal war that killed over 100,000 people, Ashoka was filled with guilt and sorrow. He turned away from conquest and embraced the peaceful teachings of Buddhism. He carved his new values onto stone pillars across his empire: kindness, tolerance, and respect for all living beings. While the West glorified warriors who died in battle, Ashoka became a symbol of rulers who sought peace instead of power. From Greece to Rome. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals: Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Asia, and Antigonus in Greece. Ptolemy built the Library of Alexandria, a shining center of learning that preserved knowledge from every corner of the known world. But while Greece's power faded, a new force rose in the West: Rome. At first, Rome was just one city among many. But its ambition was limitless. It clashed with Carthage, a powerful city in North Africa, over control of the Mediterranean. The Punic Wars raged for more than 100 years. The Carthaginian general Hannibal crossed the Alps with his war elephants, winning battle after battle in Italy. But eventually, the Roman general Scipio Africanus defeated him at Zama in 202 BCE, ending Carthage's power forever. Rome now ruled the seas. The Middle Kingdom, China, unites. At the same time, in the East, the Qin dynasty rose from the chaos of the warring states. Qin Shi Huang united China under one banner in 221 BCE, declaring himself the first emperor. He enforced legalist ideas, strict laws, strong government, harsh punishments, and built wonders like the first version of the Great Wall. But after his death, rebellion broke out. The Han dynasty soon replaced the Qin, choosing the gentler philosophy of Confucianism, emphasizing virtue, loyalty, and harmony. Under the Han, trade flourished. Chinese silk became so valuable that traders carried it westward across deserts and mountains, creating the legendary Silk Road, a network connecting China, India, Persia, and even the Roman Empire. Though distant, these great civilizations, Rome in the west, Parthia in the middle, and Han China in the east, were now part of one connected world. The Roman Dawn. By 86 BCE, Greece had fallen under Roman control. The Roman general Sulla crushed Athens, burning much of its glory to the ground. In 63 BCE, Pompey conquered Jerusalem, bringing even the Holy Land under Roman rule. Soon after, Julius Caesar rose to power. As governor of Gaul, he defeated the Celtic tribes and expanded Rome's reach to the edge of the known world. His ambition, like Alexander's before him, would reshape history forever. From the birth of democracy in Athens to the rise of Rome's mighty legions, humanity kept searching for power, for wisdom, for meaning. Every empire fell, yet each left behind a piece of who we are today. The story of us, the story of humanity, is far from over. The Roman world and the rise of Christianity. In 52 BC, war once again engulfed Gaul. The fortified city of Alesia was surrounded by walls and ditches, filled with thousands of Gallic warriors led by their proud commander Vercingetorix. Outside the walls, Julius Caesar and his Roman army stood ready. Caesar knew that a direct attack would be costly, so he chose a clever strategy. He surrounded Alesia completely, building two massive rings of fortifications. One wall faced inward to trap the Gauls, and another faced outward to defend against anyone trying to rescue them. It was a siege of endurance. For weeks, both sides suffered hunger and exhaustion. The Gauls tried to break free several times, but Roman discipline held strong. When a second Gallic army came to help, Caesar's troops fought fiercely and defeated them. Vercingetorix, surrounded and starving, surrendered himself to Caesar, ending the Gallic resistance. Over the next few years, Gaul became part of Rome. Its people were given citizenship, its culture absorbed into the empire. But back in Rome, the Senate grew uneasy. Caesar's power was growing too fast, his fame too great. They demanded he give up his army or be declared an enemy of the state. Caesar faced a choice: obey the Senate or defy them and risk civil war. When he crossed the small Rubicon River with his army, something no general was allowed to do. He knew there was no turning back. "The die is cast," he said, and the Roman Civil War began. After a series of bloody battles, Caesar defeated Pompey and became Rome's undisputed leader. The people celebrated him as a hero, shouting, "Hail Caesar!" in the streets. He introduced reforms, built new roads and aqueducts, granted citizenship to thousands, and even reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar we still use today. But his growing power alarmed the Senate. In 44 BC, Caesar was stabbed to death by men he once called friends, Brutus and Cassius. His death plunged Rome into chaos once again. From that chaos rose a new ruler, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. Together with Mark Antony, he defeated Caesar's assassins, but later turned against Antony in the famous naval battle of Actium. When Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives, Octavian became Rome's first emperor, taking the name Augustus. Under Augustus, Rome entered a new golden age. The Roman Empire had begun. And during his reign, in a small Roman province called Judea, a child was born who would change the world forever: Jesus Christ. According to the Gospel of Luke, Caesar Augustus ordered a census across the empire, forcing everyone to return to their ancestral towns. In Bethlehem, a young woman named Mary gave birth to her son in a humble stable, because there was no room in the inn. The boy would grow up to be called the King of the Jews. As Jesus grew older, stories of his miracles spread, healing the blind, multiplying loaves and fishes, and teaching love and forgiveness. His followers, known as disciples, believed he was the Son of God. 4 of them, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, wrote down his life in the Gospels, forming the foundation of what would become Christianity. But not everyone welcomed his message. Under Emperor Tiberius, the Roman governor Pontius Pilate ordered Jesus' execution by crucifixion. From that moment, his death became the symbol of a new faith that would eventually spread across the world. At first, Christianity was only a small movement within Judaism. But men like Paul of Tarsus carried its message far beyond Judea, across Greece, Turkey, and Syria, writing letters and spreading the story of Christ. Yet as Christianity grew, it also faced persecution. In 64 AD, when the Great Fire of Rome destroyed much of the city, Emperor Nero blamed the Christians. Thousands were tortured or killed. Heavy taxes and inflation followed, and revolts broke out across the empire, most notably in Judea, where Jewish rebels briefly drove out Roman forces. The Romans retaliated brutally, destroying Jerusalem and its holy temple in 70 AD. the Jewish population was scattered, and Rome emerged even stronger. Under Emperor Trajan, between 98 and 117 AD, Rome reached its greatest size, stretching from Britain to the Persian Gulf. But beyond Rome's borders, other civilizations were thriving. In South America, the Moche built grand temples and advanced farming systems in modern Peru and Chile. Nearby, the Nazca carved giant figures into the desert, the mysterious Nazca lines, whose purpose remains unknown. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, the Zapotec built Monte Alban, one of the first planned cities in the Americas. Back in Rome, new emperors struggled to hold this vast empire together. Emperor Hadrian built Hadrian's Wall in Britain to mark Rome's limits. In Judea, another Jewish revolt was crushed with terrible losses. Nearly 600,000 people were killed, and the land was left in ruins. Rome's message was clear: rebellion meant death. In China, the Han Dynasty thrived under Confucian, Taoist, and Buddhist ideas. Across the ocean, the Maya built great temples with stone masks to honor their gods. And in Persia, a new power arose: the Sasanian Empire, founded by Ardashir I, who revived the old Persian religion of Zoroastrianism and challenged Roman dominance. By the late 202 AD, both the Han and Roman empires began to crumble. Rome had grown too vast to manage. Emperor Diocletian divided it into 4 regions, a system called the Tetrarchy, but rivalry and ambition soon tore it apart. From this chaos rose Constantine the Great, a man destined to reshape both the empire and its faith. Facing his rival Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He painted that symbol on his soldiers' shields and won. Constantine became Rome's sole emperor and issued the Edict of Milan, granting freedom of religion to Christians. He founded a new capital in the East, Constantinople, and presided over the Council of Nicaea, which defined the core beliefs of Christianity. When he died in 337 AD, Rome was Christian and forever changed. But peace did not last. In 370 AD, a new threat thundered across the plains: the Huns, fierce nomadic warriors who lived for battle. They conquered tribes like the Alans and Goths and began invading Roman lands. After the death of Emperor Theodosius, Rome split again into East and West. The West, weakened and poorly led, became an easy target. In 410 AD, the Visigoths stormed Rome itself, the first time in 800 years that the Eternal City had fallen. Though they soon moved on, the message was clear: the empire was dying. The rise and fall of empires, from Attila to the Crusades. After years of uneasy peace, another treaty was signed in 442 AD. But peace never lasted long in those turbulent times. Just a year later, Attila the Hun attacked again, sweeping across cities with fire and steel. He looted and destroyed everything in his path until he reached the mighty city of Constantinople, the jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire. Yet, Constantinople's towering walls stood firm. Even the fierce Huns could not break through. So, Attila did what he always did best. He negotiated. He agreed to spare the city in exchange for an annual tribute of 2,100 pounds of gold, a fortune beyond imagination. But gold could not satisfy Attila forever. In 451 AD, his armies stormed into Gaul, what is now France, forcing former enemies, the Visigoths and Romans, to unite against him. On the eve of the great battle, legend says Attila cast bones into the fire, reading the signs of fate. He foresaw that thousands of his warriors would perish, and his vision came true. At the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, the ground ran red. After hours of brutal fighting, tens of thousands lay dead. Attila had suffered his first and only defeat. Yet even in loss, he was not finished. The next year, his armies swept through Italy, burning cities and spreading fear. When he reached the outskirts of Rome, Pope Leo I met him face to face. No one knows what was said, but legend tells of a vision the apostles St. Peter and St. Paul appeared before Attila, warning him to turn back. Whether out of fear, faith, or exhaustion, Attila withdrew. His empire, however, would not survive long after him. The fall of the Western Roman Empire. By 476 AD, the once great Western Roman Empire was collapsing. Its last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was only a boy. Power-hungry generals and mercenaries ruled behind the scenes. Among them was Odoacer, a Germanic leader sent by the Eastern Emperor to restore order. Instead, Odoacer betrayed his masters, overthrew Romulus, and declared himself King of Italy, ending the Western Roman Empire forever. But new rulers meant new conflicts. In 493 AD, Theodoric the Great of the Ostrogoths, with the backing of the Eastern Roman Emperor, invaded Italy and killed Odoacer. The Ostrogothic kingdom was born from the ashes of Rome. A golden age in the East. While Europe descended into chaos, India under the Gupta Empire was entering a golden age of mathematics and science. Scholars like Brahmagupta introduced the number 0, while Aryabhata calculated the Earth's circumference and proved it was round centuries before Europe accepted it. He refined methods to find pi and square roots, and even imagined the idea of asymptotes lines that approach curves but never touch them. The rise of Christianity in Europe. In 496 AD, Clovis I, the king of the Franks, went to battle against the Alemanni. As his army faltered, he prayed to the Christian God, "If I win this battle, I will convert to your faith." Soon, a violent thunderstorm broke, confusing the enemy. The Franks rallied and won. True to his word, Clovis converted to Christianity, uniting his people and laying the foundation for what would become France, and making Christianity the heart of Western Europe. The Byzantine Empire. In the East, the Roman Empire transformed into the Byzantine Empire, ruled from Constantinople. Under Emperor Justinian, the empire expanded into Italy, North Africa, and Spain. He ordered scholars to compile all Roman laws into the Corpus Juris Civilis, the foundation for modern European law. Justinian also built one of the most beautiful monuments in history, the Hagia Sophia, a grand cathedral covered in shining mosaics that would stand as the spiritual center of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The birth of Islam. While Christianity thrived in the West, a new faith emerged in Mecca. Around 610 AD, a humble merchant named Muhammad meditated in a cave when the angel Gabriel appeared to him, commanding, "Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot." These words became part of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Muhammad began preaching the message of one God, angering Mecca's leaders who profited from idol worship. Forced to flee to Medina, he built a united Muslim community there and defended it from invasion using brilliant strategies such as digging a trench around the city to stop enemy attacks. By 630 AD, Muhammad and his followers peacefully re-entered Mecca, forgiving their enemies and converting most of the city. By the time of his death, the Arabian Peninsula was united under Islam. After Muhammad's passing, the caliphs, his successors, carried the message of Islam beyond Arabia. They conquered Syria, Jerusalem, Persia, and Egypt, ending the Sassanid Empire and crippling the Byzantines. By 716 AD, the Islamic Empire stretched from Spain to China. The Battle of Tours. In 732 AD, Arab armies pushed deep into modern-day France. But there they met Charles Martel, leader of the Franks. In a decisive clash near Tours, the two great forces of Christianity and Islam met. The fighting was fierce, but the Franks prevailed, forcing the Arabs to retreat. The Battle of Tours stopped the Muslim advance into Europe and preserved Christianity's hold on the West. The Tang Dynasty and a golden age of culture. Far to the east, under the Tang Dynasty, China was flourishing. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism coexisted peacefully. Poets like Li Bai and Du Fu created masterpieces that still echo through time. Li Bai's famous poem reads, "The birds have vanished down the sky. The last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains." Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire. In 768 AD, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, became king of the Franks. He expanded his empire across Europe and spread Christianity wherever he went. On Christmas Day, 800 AD, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans, creating what would become known as the Holy Roman Empire. But after his death, internal strife weakened the empire. His son Louis the Pious was a kind but weak ruler, unable to stop Viking raids that terrorized Europe. Local lords began protecting their own lands, forming the roots of feudalism, a system where peasants worked for nobles in exchange for protection. The Viking Age. The Viking Age began in 793 AD when Norse warriors raided the monastery of Lindisfarne in England. The attack shocked Europe, as the raiders burned sacred sites, killed monks, and carried off treasure. Over the next centuries, the Vikings pillaged across Britain, France, and beyond, but they also explored. One Viking, Leif Erikson, sailed west from Greenland and reached a mysterious new land called Vinland, now known as Newfoundland, Canada, nearly 500 years before Columbus. The fragmentation of Charlemagne's empire. After Louis the Pious died in 840 AD, Charlemagne's empire was divided among his grandsons under the Treaty of Verdun. Charles the Bald took modern-day France. Louis the German ruled over Germany. And Lothair the eldest took a middle kingdom that soon vanished. Feudalism deepened. Kings gave land to nobles, nobles commanded knights, and peasants worked the land. But above them all stood the Pope, the voice of God on earth. The Crusades begin. In 1009 AD, when a Muslim ruler destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, believed to be the site of Jesus' crucifixion. Outrage swept across Europe. In 1095, Pope Urban II called upon all Christians to reclaim the Holy Land. He promised forgiveness and eternal glory to those who fought. Thousands of knights and peasants joined what became known as the First Crusade. The Crusaders, united and driven by faith, captured Jerusalem in 1099 AD, slaughtering many of its defenders. But the peace would not last. In 1144, Muslim forces led by Zengi, the Turkish ruler, retook Edessa, sparking the Second Crusade. This time, Europe's armies were divided by pride and politics. They starved, quarreled, and fell into chaos. By 1149, their campaign had collapsed in failure. The world beyond. While Europe fought holy wars, far to the east, King Suryavarman II in Cambodia built the magnificent Angkor Wat, a temple dedicated to Vishnu, the preserver god of Hinduism. It symbolized not only devotion but the enduring power of human creativity, a reminder that while empires rise and fall, faith and art continue to shape the heart of humanity. The rise and fall of empires. MC Time Trackers. As the sun rises over the ancient city of Angkor, the great temple of Angkor Wat stands like a mountain of stone. Its reflection dances on the surface of a vast moat. The entrance gate greets travelers with grand carvings, creatures from myths, gods from distant stories. Step closer, and you see the walls come alive, with scenes of old, warriors in battle, kings in ceremony, people living their everyday lives in ancient Cambodia. At the very center stands the central sanctuary, shaped like a pyramid, surrounded by smaller temples. Inside, carvings of Hindu gods and goddesses fill every corner. Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, watching silently through the ages. Angkor Wat was a masterpiece of human creativity, a reminder of how faith and ambition could shape entire civilizations. But while peace filled the jungles of Cambodia, far to the west, the world was on fire. The Holy Wars. In the year 1187, the great Muslim commander Saladin had grown tired of the Christian rule in Jerusalem. He called upon the Muslim world to unite, to take back the holy city. Under the burning sun near the Sea of Galilee, two massive armies met. Saladin's forces numbered 20,000 strong, while the Crusaders, only 12,000, followed their king, Guy of Lusignan. The desert heat was merciless. Thirst, exhaustion, and chaos tore through the Crusader ranks. Saladin's cavalry surrounded them, cutting off every path of escape. The Christian army fell apart, and Jerusalem once again came under Muslim control. Yet, Europe would not stay silent. The Third Crusade followed, led by three powerful kings: Frederick I of the Holy Roman Empire, Richard the Lionheart of England, and Philip II of France. They marched with faith and fury, but even the greatest armies failed to reclaim Jerusalem. The Mongol storm. Far away in the mountains of Mongolia, a boy named Temujin was born, the child who would become Genghis Khan. Legend says he entered the world holding a blood clot in his hand, a symbol of the battles he would one day fight. By the time he was a man, Genghis had united the Mongol tribes, nearly 1 million people under his rule. He banned the selling and kidnapping of women, allowed freedom of religion, and created one of the most disciplined armies in history. His horsemen rode like the wind. Kingdoms fell one after another, the Xi, the Jin dynasty, and soon much of China. His soldiers destroyed cities, burned capitals, and left behind a legend of both terror and power. No one knows exactly how many lives were lost in his wars, but his empire stretched from the Sea of Japan to the Caspian Sea. Even today, scientists believe that nearly 8% of men in Asia may be descendants of Genghis Khan. The Age of Kings and Faith. In England, while the Mongols conquered the East, another kind of revolution began, not of war, but of law. In 1215, King John of England was forced to sign the Magna Carta, a document that limited the power of the king. It promised a fair trial for every person and declared that no one could be imprisoned without reason. It was the birth of modern law, the foundation of democracy as we know it. Meanwhile, new crusades continued, one after another, but none succeeded in taking Jerusalem. The world had begun to change, and the center of power was shifting. The Kingdom of Gold. In the 1300s, far across the sands of Africa, the richest man in history began his journey. His name was Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire. When he made his holy pilgrimage to Mecca, he brought thousands of followers and camels carrying gold. He gave so much away that he caused inflation across North Africa. The price of gold crashed. Upon his return, Mansa Musa turned his capital, Timbuktu, into a city of knowledge. He built grand mosques and the University of Sankore, attracting scholars from across the Islamic world. His legacy was one of wealth, wisdom, and faith. The Aztec Empire. On the other side of the world, in the Americas, a new civilization was rising. The Aztecs built their capital where an eagle perched on a cactus eating a snake, a vision from their gods. They called this city Tenochtitlan. It stood on an island, surrounded by a lake, connected by causeways and canals. Their floating gardens, chinapas, grew maize, beans, and squash, feeding thousands. The Aztec temples reached toward the sky, built to honor gods of war and rain. Their civilization was complex, powerful, and deeply spiritual until the world beyond the ocean discovered them. The 100 Years' War and the Black Death. While the Aztecs thrived, Europe was burning. England and France fought for a century over the French throne, a conflict known as the 100 Years' War. Then came something worse than war, the Black Death. A plague that spread across Europe and Asia, carried by rats and ships, killing over 75 million people. Villages were emptied. Cities turned silent. But from tragedy came change. With so many dead, workers demanded fairer pay and rights. Slowly, the roots of social equality began to grow. The fall of empires and the rise of hope. In China, the Red Turban Rebellion rose against Mongol rule. Led by Zhu Yuanzhang, a poor farmer turned warrior, the rebels drove out the Mongols and founded the Ming Dynasty in 1368, an age of rebuilding and art. In France, a teenage girl changed the course of war. Joan of Arc, claiming divine guidance, led French troops to victory at Orléans. She was captured, accused of witchcraft, and burned at the stake at just 19. Her courage, however, inspired generations and marked the rebirth of French pride. In 1453, the Byzantine Empire finally fell. The mighty city of Constantinople was taken by Mehmed II, leader of the Ottoman Empire. Cannons roared, walls crumbled, and the Eastern Roman Empire, once the heart of the world, was no more. The Ottomans now ruled the crossroads of Europe and Asia. New worlds and new ideas. While the East fell, a new power was rising in the West. Ivan the Great freed Russia from Mongol control, building the first steps toward a new empire. Then, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west not to find a new world, but a new route to India. Instead, he landed on the islands of the Caribbean. The age of exploration had begun, forever changing the course of human history. Back in Europe, a cultural rebirth was taking shape: the Renaissance. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, while Michelangelo sculpted David and painted the Sistine Chapel. It was an era of genius, of beauty, and of rediscovering what it meant to be human. Philosophers like Niccolò Machiavelli began questioning power and morality. In his book The Prince, he wrote, "It is safer to be feared than loved." His words still echo in the halls of politics today. But faith was also changing. A monk named Martin Luther stood against the Catholic Church, angered by corruption and greed. In 1517, he nailed his 95 Theses to a church door, demanding reform. His act began the Protestant Reformation, splitting Christianity into new branches. Conquest and power. In the Americas, Hernán Cortés arrived with Spanish troops. At first, the Aztecs welcomed them, believing the strangers were gods. But soon, the truth became clear: the Spanish had come for conquest. After years of brutal battles and betrayal, the Aztec capital fell in 1521. Their empire, once glorious, was destroyed. Disease from Europe, smallpox and plague, wiped out millions more. The pattern continued as Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca Empire in South America. Guns, steel, and disease proved deadlier than any army. In the East, the Ottoman Empire under Suleiman the Magnificent reached its peak, ruling lands from Hungary to Arabia. Their cities shone with art, science, and faith. The Age of Rebellion. In England, King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church for love to marry Anne Boleyn. His decision created the Church of England and changed the religious map of Europe forever. In Russia, Ivan the Terrible rose to power, brilliant yet cruel. He built the stunning St. Beck, Basil's Cathedral, but his paranoia led to waves of executions and terror. His rule brought both glory and fear. Yet, out of the darkness, a new light was beginning to shine. Under Queen Elizabeth I, England entered a golden age of art and discovery. The playwrights of the Elizabethan Renaissance, like William Shakespeare, captured the beauty, pain, and power of the human spirit. Every rise, every fall, every empire, all of it shaped the story of us. From Angkor to London, from Mongols to Mansa Musa, humanity built, destroyed, dreamed, and began again. And that's what makes history so powerful. It isn't just the story of kings and empires, it's the story of us all. The Story of Us Part V, from empires to the modern world. As the curtain rose on a new age, William Shakespeare filled the theaters of London with words that still echo through time. He wrote about kings and betrayal. Julius Caesar told of the fall of a ruler struck down by his own friends. King John explored the chaos of war, while Henry VII showed the deep hunger humans feel for power. Other writers, Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, and John Webster, joined him in shaping the English stage, turning plays into mirrors of the human soul. Meanwhile, far across the ocean, a small settlement called Jamestown was taking root in Virginia. It was England's first colony in the New World, fragile, hopeful, and uncertain. To the north, the French explorer Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec, planting France's flag in the cold soil of Canada. But in Europe, peace was again a stranger. In 1618, the 30 Years' War erupted, one of the most destructive conflicts in history. It began when the Holy Roman Emperor tried to force Catholicism upon the Protestant people of Bohemia. The Bohemians rebelled, and soon all of Europe was at war. For 3 decades, armies marched back and forth across the continent. Cities burned, fields turned to mud and ash. France, Spain, Sweden, and the Holy Roman Empire all joined the fight, not just for faith, but for power and survival. At last, in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was signed. It ended the war, recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic, and gave individual states within the empire more freedom. It was the first modern treaty to draw new borders and a step toward the Europe we know today. In the East, China's Ming dynasty was collapsing. The emperor, worn by corruption and endless political fights, could not stop the Manchu armies that stormed across the Great Wall. In 1644, Beijing fell. The Ming dynasty ended, and a new one began, the Qing, continuing China's ancient cycle of rise and fall. In Spain, another dynasty faced crisis. When King Charles II died without an heir, Europe plunged into the War of the Spanish Succession. France supported King Louis XIV's grandson, Philip, while Austria and Britain backed Archduke Charles of the Habsburg family. The war raged for years across Europe until, in 1713, the Treaty of Utrecht was signed. Philip became King of Spain, but he had to give up any claim to the French throne. The balance of power was restored, and Europe could finally breathe again. In 1707, England and Scotland united through the Acts of Union, forming a single nation, Great Britain. Yet unity did not bring peace. Scotland resisted, and uprisings followed, especially the Jacobite rebellions of 1715 and 1745, which tried to restore the old Scottish monarchy. But across the Atlantic, a different kind of rebellion was brewing. On July 4th, 1776, a group of men gathered in Philadelphia and signed a document that changed the world, the Declaration of Independence. Its words rang with hope. All men are created equal, with rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The American Revolution had begun. King George III sent his red-coated armies to crush the uprising, but the colonists, though poorly trained, fought with knowledge of their land and courage in their hearts. In 1781, George Washington and his French allies surrounded the British at Yorktown. After weeks of siege and cannon fire, the British surrendered. A new nation was born, the United States of America. Now free, Americans faced a new question: how to govern themselves. Some wanted to make Washington their king, but they chose a democracy instead, though even that came with caution. The founders worried that the people might not always choose wisely, so they created the Electoral College, a compromise between direct democracy and guided leadership. France watched America closely. Its people were suffering under King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, a queen so out of touch that legend says she told starving peasants to eat cake. In 1789, the people had enough. They rose up, stormed the Bastille prison, and declared a revolution. The king and queen were executed, and France turned to a young revolutionary named Maximilien Robespierre. Robespierre began as a voice for freedom, but grew into a figure of terror. Under his rule, thousands were executed in the Reign of Terror, all in the name of liberty. By 1794, France had had enough of blood. Robespierre was arrested and guillotined, ending the revolution's darkest chapter. A new government, the Directory, tried to bring stability, but it was weak, and into the chaos stepped a soldier of ambition and genius, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's rise was meteoric. In 1805, he crushed Austria and Russia at the Battle of Austerlitz. Soon, he ruled most of Europe from Spain to Poland. But when he invaded Russia in 1812, the cold and hunger destroyed his army. It was the beginning of his fall. In 1815, he made one last attempt at glory, the 100 Days, but at the Battle of Waterloo, he was defeated for good. While Napoleon fought in Europe, revolution burned elsewhere. In South America, Simón Bolívar led the fight against Spanish colonial rule. From Venezuela to Colombia, Peru, and finally Bolivia, a nation named in his honor, he freed millions from European control, earning the title the Liberator. By the mid-1800s, new ideas were reshaping the world. In 1848, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, challenging capitalism itself. They imagined a society where workers owned the means of production and no one lived in chains. Their words, "Workers of the world, unite," would echo through revolutions for centuries. Soon after, another kind of conquest began, not of ideology, but of land. European nations turned their eyes toward Africa in what history calls the scramble for Africa. Explorers and traders entered the continent, followed by armies and colonizers who divided Africa into artificial borders. They drew lines that ignored tribes and cultures, setting the stage for future conflicts. By the late 1800s, nearly all of Africa was under European rule. Then came 1914, and with it, the shot that changed everything. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated in Sarajevo, and within weeks, the world was at war. Alliances pulled nations into battle: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, France, Britain. The Great War, World War I, began. For 4 years, millions died in the mud of Europe. Empires fell, borders were redrawn, and the Ottoman Empire dissolved. In 1918, the guns finally fell silent. But peace did not last long. A man named Adolf Hitler rose in Germany, promising to restore his country's pride. In 1939, he invaded Poland, sparking World War II. Like the conquerors before him, Alexander, Caesar, Genghis Khan, he dreamed of empire. But his empire was built on hatred and destruction. By 1945, the Allies closed in. The Soviets stormed Berlin, Hitler fell, and Germany surrendered. In Asia, the war ended when the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Humanity entered a new and terrifying atomic age. Out of the ashes came invention. Alan Turing's computer laid the foundation for the digital revolution. The Cold War began a tense, silent struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. For 50 years, the world stood divided by ideology and fear. Then, in 1969, humanity looked up again. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon and said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was proof that despite all our wars and divisions, humans still dreamed of the stars. As the years passed, the world grew smaller. Computers connected continents, and cell phones changed the way we spoke to one another. Technology made us faster, but also more fragile, reminding us that progress always comes with a price. And so, after thousands of years, from stone tools to space travel, we return to the ancient story of Gilgamesh, the king who sought immortality. At the end of his journey, Gilgamesh learns a truth that still defines us. Life you seek, you will never find. For when the gods created man, they gave him death as his share, and kept life for themselves. History is an unfinished book, rewritten with every generation. Empires rise and fall. Ideologies burn and fade. But through it all, one thing remains. Humanity keeps searching for meaning, for freedom, for life beyond the limits of time. And that was our journey through time, a story written not just in books, but in the hearts of every civilization that ever lived. If you're still here, thank you for traveling with us through history. Remember, every moment we live today is a future piece of history waiting to be told. So keep your curiosity alive, keep learning, and keep exploring the echoes of time. I'm your host from MC Time Trackers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another story from the past. And tell us in the comments, which period of history do you want us to explore next?